What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Happiness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Shiao-yin Kuik, and we speak about the role of facilitation when it comes to intact teams and the mistakes managers and leaders can make when they put on the full role of a facilitator instead of keeping it to the act of facilitating. So we speak about psychological safety and why it's important to cultivate a culture of very clear and kind honesty within a team and an organization, and what it actually takes to get an intact team and an organization to this full honesty. Because on the flip side, if we don't cultivate that, we could end up in a conspiracy of stupidity, as Ying calls it. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download your free one-page summary. And now, lean back and be inspired. Hello, Shiao-yin. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Good to see you.
I'm very excited about this conversation and explore maybe topics of organizational intelligence or not.
Sure. I will go where you need.
Yes, and dynamics and psychological safety. And I always kick it off with the same question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
That's a great question. I don't think if anyone has ever asked me that before. I don't identify myself as a facilitator. I do use it to describe one of the skills or tool sets that I bring to do my work. I primarily identify as a cultural change strategist, and that involves being a coach. It involves being a facilitator. It involves being a bit of a curriculum designer. So I look at it as it's a very necessary part of the work. So I do see facilitation as a core skill that's needed for change.
And how so?
How so? Well, if you want things to change, or you want people to come alongside you to change it, you have to sort of support people's increase of awareness so that we know more about what we're talking about. We can see where we agree, where we disagree. And once we have a richer shared picture of points of connection, disconnection, agreement, disagreement, then we can move ahead. But if we're not brought to a shared picture, then it's very hard for things to move forward. Yeah, so that's, I think, where a lot of change efforts can be stalled, either like overtly or covertly. Yeah, because no one has done the hard work of facilitating out stuff from that's sort of like around the table. It's not being put on the table. So that's how I see facilitation work. Yeah, the art of like putting things on the table.
I love that. I love the image you just described, to take all the parts and then thereby facilitating alignment, knowing what we're talking about. And from there, so common ground to then move, change, and have these difficult conversations.
Yes. Yeah. And I like to tell people that common ground doesn't mean this like soft Care Bear language of, oh, let's all come to a kumbaya agreement of each other. It's a common ground of facts or a common ground of things that we are looking at. What are the cards we are playing? You know, it's hard to come to an agreement or disagreement if people hide cards. You know, like you're not playing fair with this. Like, to keep it really simple, like, for example, in Asian culture, sometimes Asian parents play a very unfair game with their kids, you know? Like the kid can go up to them and like, oh, hey, mom, like, what would you like for Mother's Day, you know, this year? And like the mom can say, you should know. It's like, how are you supposed to continue playing that game, you know? Like, what do you mean I should know? I can't know if you don't show me, give me something to work with.
Yeah.
And in those situations, if a facilitator was present, the facilitator would then have to use the art of what are some good questions and what is some good context setting, what are some safety things I can give here so that the conversation that needs to happen happens, but sometimes we are not skilled at having the conversation we really want. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to have these very specific examples. And A, I can assure you that it's not only Asian mothers. B, I think that, oh no, did you froze? Did you freeze? Check.
Yeah, now it's back.
Yes. So rest assured, it's not only Asian mothers who expect their children to read their minds. And what I hear is this skill to make the implicit explicit. And I think yes, it starts with our mothers. It shows up in, I think, so many relationships where we expect our partner to know what we need and to fulfill all these unvoiced expectations. And I think then at work, we just do the same thing, and it's maybe even more difficult to make explicit what we expect from each other, how we do want to work, how we don't want to work.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to have a good, honest, authentic, kind, compassionate conversation. It's hard.
Yeah.
And I think the more we appreciate how hard it is, even in your most trusted, lovely relationships, that's hard too. Yeah. So then multiply that by all of the not so lovely relationships that we may have at work, that trust levels vary in an organization. So there is always some level of dishonesty in a room. Yeah. And to accept that that's a fact and it's not always a bad thing, to ask people more specific questions that help them to be a little bit more honest than they normally are. Yeah.
Where do you think does the dishonesty come from? And what are the questions? So because also where I'm coming from with my question is the dishonesty, I assume, is there as a means of protection. So
It's a form of also a form of like what I assume is protective of you. But I may be wrong. I may hold back information because I may think it's better for you not to know. And that's the tricky part, that sometimes people aren't being deliberately ill-intentioned in being dishonest. I mean, dishonest is the harsher description of it. But I think it's a true description of it, because we are dishonest with the ones we love sometimes.
And what does it take then to make this shift, assuming that it's already difficult amongst those we love most?
Yeah.
How can we make it easier amongst those that we haven't necessarily chosen to be in our life?
I think that and there's an underrated leadership skill that is called go first. So someone has to role model and be the first to be vulnerable and honest with what are they currently thinking and feeling and wanting in the moment. And it's scary sometimes to say that out loud because I need to trust that if I put it out there, it's not going to be purposeless. It's going to be noticed. It's going to be experienced. It's going to be handled with some level of respect, if not care. Then you have to take the risk because there isn't a guarantee. Even with someone you love, say a beloved spouse, is it going to be okay to tell a beloved spouse that when you said that thing to me, it made me really, really mad at you. It made me feel you don't care. And of course, some people are like, "Oh, I say that to my spouse every day. It's no issue." But but you could be in a situation where you feel, "Oh no, I can't say that because I think that will hurt him, or hurt her. And well, you wouldn't know until you put that out there, and then let's manage that respectfully. Yeah, on both ends. So yeah, I do think it's scary because not every thought and feeling and desire we have in the moment feels easy or safe to share. Yeah.
And a few things come to my mind. One is the concept of the oxygen mask, that we have to put our oxygen mask on first. And I think one of these honesties that we often neglect is taking care of ourselves first. So maybe this means not seeing our friends, or that means holding back a little bit for ourselves, but then also for the benefit of everyone. Because if we are depleted, we are not fun to hang out with. And I think in an organizational context, managers who are at their edge, for them to actually speak the truth and take time for themselves and to de-stress, because otherwise it has negative consequences on their teams.
Yes. And I guess the skillfulness of the facilitator or the manager who's trying to use this skill called facilitation is there's actually so many layers to what I am thinking, feeling, and wanting in a given moment. Which one should I be honest about? There's so many things to be honest about. And that's the art of it, that now I have to choose out of the, let's say, the 10 different data points I could float out in this moment, which one feels the most useful or relevant or necessary for the situation, for me, for our relationship here. And you don't know. There's no textbook to tell you that. There isn't one. You have to put it out there as an experiment and work with the results of your experiment, for better or for worse. But what's important is you don't do it carelessly. You don't do it unintentionally. I think that an unskilled facilitator or an immature facilitator is like, oh, okay, let's facilitate a more honest conversation in a room. Let's just open up like some time bombs here, let's step into the minefield. And I think that's not responsible or respectful of how difficult it is for people to be honest, Yeah, so you kind of want to be really reverent and respectful of the difficulty of honesty. And let's just go carefully, let's go very intentionally, and let's not be afraid of causing some tension or discomfort, because that's sometimes necessary. So it's like, I'm not going to intentionally hurt you, but I may say something that feels hurtful. You know, like, and I can't think on your behalf what you will receive is hurtful. But like, I have to put something out there that it's not with the intent to hurt,
But to help grow. And sometimes to help someone grow means speaking out the uncomfortable truth.
Yes, and I think
the candid feedback.
It's a huge difficulty right now, even in, let's say, in public conversations, right? Say you want to have an honest conversation about bias or race, and most people say, like, let's not even go there because it's too difficult, it's too hurtful, right? And I cannot share with the other the real things I'm thinking and feeling because it's going to cause a huge offense. So let's just not talk. Let's just stay really, really far away from each other and don't even go there. But the problem is then we become progressively less and less wise and less sensitive about this topic. So it's a paradox, right? It's really paradox. So it's like, if you want us to get better, say it, talking about race, we do have to hold this very safe, respectful, reverent space where I'm going to allow you permission to say the thing which might be hurtful to me, but I would rather hear it, than to fit you. And this is like such dangerous territory, right? Because you're like, oh, so are we saying let's just give the racists like space to say whatever they want to say? So again, we're not saying let's give space for people who are deliberately callous or deliberately hurtful,
And how can we create the ground rules of respect so that nobody oversteps this agency or permission to speak up and to speak their own truth.
Yes. And so like when you have like, let's say a facilitator is put into, say, let's say this like racial conversation, then the facilitator's job, difficult but powerful job, is to support, let's say, these two individuals' ability to talk about this tough topic with a bit more guardrails. That's what the facilitator does. Like the facilitator can say like, okay, let's pause it there. You know, and let's now ask party A, how did you feel when party A said that, you know? So you're sort of giving those support systems that the conversation needs. Yeah.
And when do you think that, coming back also to the distinction that you made for yourself, that you would use facilitation, but you don't call yourself a facilitator? And I think the same would be true for managers.
Yes.
Hopefully, in the best of all cases, they use facilitation to guide their teams through these difficult conversations and help them to be a little bit more honest.
Yes, yes.
When do you think is it possible for the manager to really facilitate these conversations and create this culture of psychological safety, what it actually is? And when is it necessary to have someone external for whom it might be easier to maybe also provoke and to... I'm thinking of what you described with that you have to be very skillful in what uncomfortable questions to ask and how to guide the group into opening up, being more honest, and how easy it is to push them off the edge.
Yeah. I think about, say you're a married couple and you have like a marriage therapist who's essentially playing a facilitator role, right? Like, when do you call in the therapist? You know, the thing is, the therapist cannot be there every single day and every single moment. The therapist is there to help you through a season, a difficult season, a season where you realize we want to bring our conversations to a certain level and we feel we don't have the skill or we don't have the neutrality to have that well. So you will engage an external party to sit in and play a bit of referee role, play a bit of like, let me give you some skills. But ultimately, I still have to go home and live with this person and facilitate that conversation with them. And I guess I bring that up because no one wants to be married to a facilitator. No one wants to have wake up every day with a facilitator. You know, it's like you know, if you want your husband to be a husband, you want your wife to be a wife, you want your manager to be a manager. You don't want your manager to be a facilitator. You don't want your manager to be your coach. No, it's like if I want a coach, I'll engage a coach. But I do want my manager to utilize facilitation and coaching in the way they do their managing work, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, like it's funny because in my early days of like learning coaching and facilitating, like sometimes my husband would like say, "Oh, don't use that voice," you know. Don't,
Your facilitator voice.
yeah. It's like, and when you're learning things for the first time, there is some clumsiness. Like how do you turn on how do you use this skill? And I realized what's crucial is to focus on who is the person I'm being right now. You know, when I'm engaged as a facilitator by a client organization, it's very clear I'm a facilitator. I am not a part of your organization. You know? If I'm in this weird blended situation of I am the wife who's trying to facilitate a conversation with a husband, or I'm a manager trying to facilitate a conversation with my reportee, I have to be very clear. They don't want me to be a facilitator. They want me to be a manager. They want me to be their spouse. That's the identity that they need me to be in. And they will not trust me if I'm a facilitator. It's like, because a facilitator is saying, I'm not a part of you, essentially.
Yes.
I am standing apart. And if I'm working with a client, that's what they want me to do. I'm not here to be like, hi, if I was an employee, this is what I would be thinking. It's like, we didn't hire you for that, you know. Yeah, so I think that's the difficulty I find for, say, leaders or managers who are trying to learn facilitation or coaching skills in the early days as they're trying to mature. Yeah, it will be a bit difficult to like figure out, how do I use this in a way that doesn't make my peers or my colleagues or my bosses feel like I'm trying to facilitate them.
Yeah.
Because facilitation does carry that, I don't have the right, okay, the harsh word is the arrogance of like, I
Yeah.
am not a part of this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And
You know?
totally. And I think also the manipulative part. I had conversations on the podcast about facilitators being manipulators.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because we do create a process for
Mhm.
groups and individuals to have conversation to achieve to a certain outcome. We don't know the outcome, but we design this process. So it is an act of manipulation. And I think if we're using it in our private context, we are manipulating. So if we're overly facilitating, we are kind of manipulating the conversation of the situation. And people notice that.
They do, and they hate it.
Yeah, and I love your honesty in stating that, because I've been told so many times by my mom telling me, stop facilitating me, I'm not one of your clients. By my friends telling me, Miriam, please don't facilitate your next date.
Yeah, and it's a professional issue, that a lot of, I think, the helping professionals will all encounter.
Yeah.
I'm sure counselors and therapists and coaches and anyone who helps people, where the professional distance is a good thing. But if I'm trying to use this skill set in a situation where I'm a lot more personally integrated into it, then I really have to be clear, what's my primary identity here? What's my identity and what's my skill?
Yeah, and what's my role? So what are the expectations?
Yeah.
And for this, I think it touches upon something else that is very underrated, I think, is the clarifications of roles we play, especially when we have different hats on.
Yes.
So the manager facilitating could be one, but then facilitators who come in but have also subject matter expertise, or a trainer who is using facilitation and maybe a little bit of consulting.
Yes.
So how can we create the clarity and honesty around that?
I suppose the one easy way, and I guess I'm saying it with some hesitation, is it doesn't always work out. One way is to name like, okay, I'm saying this right now as I'm saying this right now as a friend. I'm saying this right now as a facilitator. So you can try and name the identity that you are stating something in. And that works sometimes, and sometimes it also doesn't work because it's not so much about what you say. It's what you're embodying in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah, like I can't say like, right now I want to say this to you as a friend, but if I'm not expressing it or behaving in a way that is a friend, and they're not going to believe when you put that verbal like flag around it.
And now it becomes there's so many layers to that. It's so complex, because it then brings, okay, what is our general understanding of the characteristics of a friend? It's the warmth, it's the care, it's maybe a little bit of almost altruism. And then when you say, I'm saying this as a facilitator or as a mother or an expert in the field, what are the attributes that we mean and that we expect the group to understand when we say that?
Yeah, because I think the good that external facilitator brings to a conversation is precisely their outsider status. I am on the boundaries of outside and inside at the same time. You invited me inside into your organization, inside into might be a very intimate conversation that not every outsider gets to hear, but I get to hear it because you engaged me for this work, you know? So I'm inside and yet I'm outside at the same time. And that's the power of engaging an external facilitator. And that's why if I am your manager and I try and put on this presumptuous external facilitator hat and I'm both inside and outside, that's the point of offense. Like, how dare you separate yourself from this situation? You are in this situation with me, you know? So it's like if I facilitate my husband, like, oh, so when you did that, how did that make you feel? It's like, don't talk to me as if you were not part of that situation.
Yes.
You know, you have a relationship with them as a manager or as like a spouse, you know, you are integrated with them. You are an insider. Don't pretend you are not an insider. Yeah.
And and hence it becomes very difficult to be part of the process where the facilitator usually owns the process, the group owns the result. If the manager is really stepping into the facilitator role of a complex process, then they cannot be neutral towards the outcome, and they cannot by definition be part of the discussion, because you cannot moderate, you cannot participate and facilitate at the same time, I believe.
Yeah. It's like you can't, I guess if a manager is trying to strictly be a facilitator, let's say in a meeting, that means they are not subjecting themselves to their own process. You know, it's like, so the arrogance of the facilitator / manager could be like, oh, let's take a pause right now and everybody like share how are you feeling in this moment, and I don't share how I'm feeling in this moment. You know, that's me treating myself as if I am above this thing. I'm not part of it. So I guess for a manager who wants to use, let's say, that intervention, whatever process you subject the room to, you also must be subject to it.
And that's what you mentioned in the beginning, right? The role modeling is one of the underestimated skills. And I think, so I think then there are also degrees on how do you facilitate, because as a facilitator, I would go first whenever it comes to showing vulnerability. But I would go last when it comes to sharing ideas, because I don't want to influence the group. And I think this is even more true when you're a leader or manager using facilitation without stepping fully into the role of the facilitator.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think for, at least for organizations, it's useful that everyone has the skill of facilitation, not just like the managers or the leaders, but everyone ought to learn the foundational skill of facilitation, because it's just about playing, I suppose, like playing like a support system of a conversation that needs to happen. Yeah. Then the manager is not burdened with like, only I can facilitate this. You know, but if your whole team, let's say, has varying levels of facilitation skill, everyone can sort of play a little bit of tag team, so that you don't always have to wear the hat of, let me facilitate this meeting. You can take a step back, you know? Yeah.
And I think it's a two-way street. So I think if only the manager had facilitation skills, or not even, then everyone is complaining about the quality of their meetings and that they're not going anywhere and that it's a toxic culture and all these things. And if it's only one person who holds the skill, then suddenly it's their responsibility, although it's a shared responsibility. It's like, like a relationship, like a marriage. It's not that one knows how to solve a conflict and the other one just follows. It doesn't work like that. And I think to share this responsibility and agency, or to give agency to the people, that they are part of the solution as much as they are part of the problem.
Yeah. So I think one gift that someone with facilitation skill can do in their personal and professional situations is you can design a process that everyone is free to use, like let's just say a simple process like pause, you can say in a let's say a manager team situation, you can say, all right, this is the process. Whenever we have a meeting and something's not working in it, everyone here has the power to just say, okay, can we pause it here? This meeting's not working. That's a simple way of like upskilling everyone in a minute because they now have a process, right? That everyone can mutually agree on.
And what I love about this simple tool is it comes back to what you said first, where we started about this honesty, about speaking your truth.
Yeah.
And suddenly you give permission to everyone to point out the truth that maybe everyone is feeling, but nobody is speaking about.
Yes. And giving like a simple process and a simple linguistic intervention that everyone can like easily catch on. It's empowering because sometimes people literally don't know. Number one, they don't know they can stop a meeting. Number two, they don't know what's the safest way to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you are the power and you say, all right, everyone can just say like, okay, can we pause here? Something's not working for me. Then you gave them that.
Yeah.
Now they just have to play that card.
And it does even one more thing earlier on in the process, that by adding the permission on this rule, you acknowledge that it's possible
yes.
that a meeting is not working. You acknowledge that it's possible that the meeting is not working for one single person, and this can have an impact on the entire group. Yeah. And just by stating that, suddenly everyone is like, oh, we don't have to pretend that this is working, although it's not.
Yeah. And that is an example, a very simple living example of how a manager can go first. It's a facilitation skill too. Yeah. So I do like demystifying facilitation and coaching and all of these other things. I prefer to tell people that if something's not working for you, you can change it. And there are very, very small ways that you can do something different and just experiment with it. Yeah. Then it doesn't feel like, oh no, now I got to be this like really certified champion facilitator before my meetings work better. No, you just have to be the person who goes first and says, this meeting isn't working.
Yeah. So how would you then, also thinking of this culture of honesty and stating what's not working and what is, there are individuals who speak to think, who reiterate thoughts, and for many speak too much.
Yeah.
And this often sucks the energy out of the space and crowds out other voices. Yeah. How would you go about that? Do you have a tip for either another simple rule, or how far can you push the honesty, or how to make it a non-violent
I guess it's different from whether you are the power figure or the not so powerful figure, right? If you are the powerful figure who does recognize that there are some people who suck a lot of time out of a meeting, then you can use your power to establish a new process, and you take the hit. You can say like, all right, what I've noticed is sometimes our meetings run over, or we don't always get to hear from everyone in the room because some of us have a lot to say about certain opinions or certain ideas, and that's okay. But what I want is to hear from, I don't know, more voices, or what I want is to end on time. So you don't have to demonize anybody, but you are naming the honesty of what you have noticed, and you can double check whether you're the only one. You can say like, are we all okay if we manage time a bit better by like making sure that everybody gets a say and no one goes past 2 minutes? You can double check. And if everybody says they're cool with it, then good, you have their permission. And then establish that 1 or 2 simple processes, right?
Thank you.
So that's if you're a power figure. You get to set the rules in that way, and you should use your power for that. But if you are not the power figure and you can't depend on them to declare these rules, and you don't have the confidence or assurance that if you did something similar, people would hear you. Then a simple trick that I teach is to pause, replay, and reroute, right? So pause means you can do like, let's say, can I pause you there, David? Let's say David is the over talker, right? Oh, can I pause you there, David? Pause is a great word because it's not, can I stop you there, David? Pause is like, because I acknowledge that you will have airtime to replay again, so let me pause you there. And that gets their attention, and you must immediately replay. So replay means you play back to them something that you honestly heard from them, right? So that means you are paying attention to them. So you can say like, oh, can I pause you there, David? I'm hearing you on how difficult that project was. And that is very concerning, right? So it's like, I'm validating for you that whatever you said has not gone unheard. So that's why I need to play it back. If you have something positive to affirm about that playback, then express that. If you have nothing positive, then at least play back the facts of what you heard. I heard you have many concerns about how difficult that project was. And then reroute is, in that moment, quickly reroute the conversation to at least one or two specific people. If not, scattershot it to 3 or 4 so that someone needs to catch the ball, So what it would sound like in a seamless way is like, rah, 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 rah. Oh, hey, David, could I pause you there? I love what you just said about the need for us to do A and B. And I'm really curious right now about what sales thinks about it. Can I hear 2 or 3 voices from sales? What do you think? And it doesn't even need to be what do you think about what David said. Otherwise, then it becomes this big ping pong, right? It can be, I hear 2 or 3 voices about what is your own take on the project David's talking.
Yeah.
So, and that's your signal to, hey, room, come on, let's work with each other here. Because generally, if you are suffering from an overtalker, there's probably at least a couple of people who are as well, but they didn't know what to do. And now you've thrown the ball. Yeah. So you can use that. It's a very simple technique, right? Pause, replay, and reroute. Yeah.
Simple, not easy.
Yes, because the hard part is to like pause them first.
To pause them first, and I think to self-regulate, because it, as you described, it rises or falls with the ability to acknowledge and appreciate what has been said. Because if we pause and say, okay, thank you, David, I would also be curious what others think, then they will be like, oh, you haven't even listened.
Yes.
And then there's a lot of anger. It's like a steam cooker, suddenly, a pressure cooker. But by acknowledging and mirroring back, okay, I paid attention, I listened to your words, I can maybe relating to a feeling, I can hear your frustration about this project and the difficulty.
Yeah. And I think that's something that less experienced facilitators also have to sit with, that the process and the interventions don't work in isolation. It's not like, oh, here's the magic trick. Pause, replay, reroute. I got the trick, because it's ultimately about the use of self, right? The big mystery skill for all facilitators. It's the use of self. Like, how are you using yourself in that moment? And unskilled, never learned facilitation thingy person in your team, but is really great at using themselves, would be far more effective. Say David is like, rah, 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 and the lovely, calm person on your team who's like, David, that was a really good point. I wish I thought of that, and saying it with sincerity could be the best,
Yes.
Yeah, so the people catch the energy and the emotion and the being and the identity, all these like mysterious stuff that are not about the skill or the particular intervention you're using. That's the master thing that people are reading. And then they will read the intervention.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it almost sounds like the skill to detach the person from the content, from what they're saying, and still bringing it back to a personal level. Because I think what happens often in tech teams is if there's this one person who speaks a lot, then everyone else stops listening even because, oh, here we go again. Okay, let me get my phone to distract from this discomfort because nobody dares to speak up. And hence this reinforces, then they want to find the voice and be heard. So they speak even more and more and more, and the others get even more deaf because they don't want to hear it. And by acknowledging or by pointing out something positive and appreciating them publicly might actually break the cycle because it gives the talker what they need, confirmation, appreciation, and the others a pause.
I feel it in tech teams, there is a lot of power in the everyday interactions that teams have, you know. Like if you are working with an overtalker and you, let's say, know that overtalker doesn't come from ill intention, they just happen to talk a lot, right? It's great if on a day-to-day basis, rather than think about the facilitation aspect, you're thinking of the let's build a bedrock of relational safety and relational security. Because once you have that relational security with each other, you can say things to your friend, say things to a trusted colleague like, in the meeting you talk a little bit much, and the person doesn't take offense because we have a relationship here. I think it's always scary if you don't have a relationship. Like on my team, some of my team members talk more than others, right? I wouldn't classify them as an overtalker, but they would talk more. And I realized like sometimes I will say in a very humorous way, like, oh, I've stopped listening. And in a humorous way, not in an aggressive, like I've stopped listening to you, but I let them know the exact moment where I'm no longer listening. Yeah. And I say it in a humorous way, and it's not in a big professional setting. It's not a meeting. It's just a lunchtime casual conversation. And I'll be like, okay, I've stopped listening.
You just lost me. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you've just lost me, or I have no idea what you just said. And that's an example of let's put some honesty on the table, but honesty doesn't have to be brutal. Honesty, I really like how Brene Brown puts it. I use it as my own mantra that you need to be clear and kind, right? Yeah. And you don't want to be nice.
Yeah.
Right? Because
thank you for the distinction. Yes.
Yeah. Be clear and kind. Don't be nice, because nice is often code for being unclear
and sugarcoating.
Which is an act of unkindness. If I had stopped listening to someone, it's better for me to give them that information than to pretend I'm listening. Yeah. Out of like, I don't want to hurt this person, so let me nod along, but actually inside I'm thinking of something else already.
Yes. And I think it's this little act as when someone has something between their teeth.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a noodle in their face. You want to tell them before they go out to speak in public.
Yeah.
And there's nothing bad about it. And I think as a warning, these kind of maybe disturbing micro behaviors is indeed an act of kindness. And I'm thinking also of the model of Kim Scott in Radical Candor, that when we come from a place of care and we are clear and honest about the feedback, then it will be well received because they can perceive that it's for their growth. And but if the care is lacking, if we don't mean well, if we're not interested in the growth of the other person, then we're just obnoxious.
Yeah. So I agree with that for sure. My own rule of thumb is the harder the truth you want to deliver, then the greater the love you better be prepared to serve it alongside. And it doesn't mean I have to love, like Care Bear love every hard or difficult person in front of me. It just means if I want to deliver really hard truth and if I want it to sink in, delivering it with a lot of care, I think allows the message to actually land a little bit better. Yeah.
Where I was talking to my team of associates recently about how to deliver constructive feedback and to avoid the feedback sandwich. Or we discussed, why is the feedback sandwich so
I hate
bad?
that.
Which is basically the idea, for those who don't know. You start with something positive, then you have the critical feedback, things that you really want the other person to change, and then you end with something positive again. And the thing is, it's terrible because it deviates from what we actually have to say. And very often it's nice, but it's not kind. So these are nice words that are not beneficial, or they're vague.
Yeah.
And
it immediately renders the positive thing that you said as a lie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what Adriana said in my team, she was like, what she said was, when we are purposeful and we explain why this feedback is important to us, and why we see a growth and learning opportunity in it for the other person. There doesn't need to be a sugarcoating or some appreciation, because showing that we care for their growth is already kind enough.
Yeah.
And
it has to be this, I'm in it with you, and I'm not apart from you in some sense. Like, I'm not saying this in a like, I am better than you, I'm superior than you.
Patronizing.
Yeah, it's not patronizing, like, because we've all suffered from, like, our parent figures coming to us and, like, this is for your own good, Yes, like, oh, hate that, right? And nobody likes that vibe, right? Because, like, it's so hard to listen to someone who acts as if they do not suffer from imperfections themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, if you want to give, let's say, difficult feedback, it's good to find that part of yourself that can empathize, with, like, that you suffer from that too. Or you recognize at least how difficult it is to struggle through that. So let's say someone, I don't know, let's say someone has issues with meeting deadlines in a team with everyone who's, like, super good at meeting deadlines, and let's say you are a great deadline meter, right? It's, if there is a part of you that can let them know, I can see how difficult it is to be in this team where everyone seems to be very, like, they want to move at a certain pace, and you prefer your pace. And actually, there's nothing wrong with your pace. It just happens that you are in this atmosphere where moving this fast is almost a necessity. So I get it. So let's work together on this, right? So it's so important that we try to secure each other as much as possible. Yeah, that, like, another great mantra I like to sit with is from the world of social work, where they tell themselves, the person is the person, the problem is the problem, the person is not the problem. Solve the problem, don't solve the person. And I think it's a great mantra, because it's when I, like, say I'm a manager and I really need to talk to my peer or my reportee about this not okay thing that they're doing. I have to treat them as a person who is okay, right? Like, you're okay, I'm okay. And once we've established that, let's begin to look at the thing that you're doing that isn't that okay. But you are okay. Enough to do something about that not okay thing. That's the not okay action.
Yeah. And I think this is maybe the one and first things to then also establish in groups or in intake teams. Everyone is okay. We are okay.
Yeah.
And this means that there are hiccups.
Yeah. And I guess from a listener who's like, what's this okay language? I mean, this is the language from attachment theory or attachment styles, where I'm okay and you're okay means that I have a positive leaning enough story about me, and I have a positive leaning enough story about you, right? It doesn't mean, like, it's an angelic story. So it's not like, oh, you are an angel and I'm an angel and we're all angels here. It's not that. It's like, you made a mistake and you're willing to fix it. It's a positive leaning enough story.
Yeah.
Versus you made a mistake and you're a major screw up. I mean, that's definitely negative leaning. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for specifying that. For me, it's also this, as you referred to it earlier, there's nothing to be fixed. So I am okay means I have my flaws, but I don't need fixing. It's just
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We are not things to be fixed. We are people who are flawed, who may get things wrong occasionally, but we have the strengths and the capabilities, and hopefully you have the willingness to do something about it. Yeah, and I will treat you as so until you prove me wrong. And even if you prove me wrong, it is still on me to treat you as a dignified human being capable of doing something about the mistake that they have made.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how accountability works. Because if a person is incapable of doing anything about the wrong thing that they've done, then why are you trying to hold them accountable? They're incapable of it. Yeah.
Then there's no, then it's wasted energy anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important for leaders, managers, facilitators to take care of their own energy and to be in a good place, because this costs a lot of energy to see the positive, to acknowledge that we are all okay and that mistakes happen, and to find this empathy. And I think in a time where the number of burnouts are just skyrocketing, and burnout, I think one of the characteristics of a burnout is that we lack empathy, the capacity to hold empathy for others. And that's why it's so important, I think.
Yeah. No, just feeling the moment. Yeah.
In our exploration call, you used the beautiful concept of conspiracy of stupidity.
Yeah.
And I would like to just spend a moment on that. What you meant by that, maybe also to.
I think that term first struck me when I was in Parliament for a short time, 3.5 years, as a nominated member of Parliament in Singapore. And it was my first time being in, I suppose, part of the system, right? And, you're surrounded by like other parliamentarians. And there are a mix of human beings in there, Some are wonderful and some are like a bit of a question mark around them, right? And there were one or two encounters I had in Parliament, just ordinary, conversations where they said things that were very like, it was a bit like, why would you think it's okay to say something like that? But I recognized in the moment, in that conversation, I didn't say anything about it. It was like they said the weird thing, and I would think inside me, that's not okay to say that. But verbally, I didn't express anything, And like after like much reflection on that, on one hand, I can feel really outraged and angry that, oh, how can like people in power say that kind of things? And while that's true, what's also true is I enabled it. I enabled it in the sense that I did not say anything about it in the moment, which is the best moment to learn, right? I was dishonest about how that conversation was not working for me. So that's when I felt empathy for, say, people like that. Well, it made me wonder, how long have you walked around corridors of power and probably surrounded by people who may be not cool with some of the things you say, but not say it to your face? And that is unkind, actually. And I understand why it's so difficult for but if you say that, what if that person's offended? Then you get cancelled by someone who's powerful. Why put myself in that shoes, right? And that's true also. And that's why it's a conspiracy of stupidity, right? Like I know something that you don't know, right? And maybe another person also knows exactly the same thing. But both of us are in conspiracy right now not to tell the offender anything, because let's not rock the boat here. Let's just keep each other and the offender and the system all a little bit stupid because like I'm not prepared to make known something that doesn't work for me. And when I go into organizations, that's what I see, and I don't see it from a sense of like, oh man, you guys are idiots for conspiring to keep each other stupid. Like, I know, I understand, it's hard. But you can say you have one of those like huge, hellish meetings where there are 40 people in a room, right? And there are powerful figures who are talking. And the figures can be talking about things which a lot of us, smaller fish are like thinking like, why would they say that? That's kind of stupid. The room has wisdoms.
Mm.
And yet the room is not going to name it out loud. It's like, I know and you know that this is stupid, but oh well, let's all be stupid.
Yeah.
But we suffer. But everybody suffers for it. Yeah. So I guess a facilitator's job is to try to do something about the conspiracy of stupidity.
Yeah.
And to see it with some empathy. Sometimes marriages get stuck in a conspiracy of stupidity. I know what care looks like for me, but I will not tell you how to care for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a conspiracy. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love this concept. And I wonder whether the same rules would apply that you mentioned earlier, that naming it, so similar to the pause or similar to these little rules, just naming it, okay, it might happen that someone says something that doesn't feel okay for some of us.
Yeah.
How can we find maybe a word or shall we pause?
Yeah.
To talk about that, because sometimes also we may say something that we don't mean in an aggressive, mean or bad way, and still the way it's heard is very different. And then also the conspiracy of stupidity could lead to a situation that blows up into something very dangerous and toxic, although it all started with a maybe naive word or statement.
Yeah. It's going to take so much courage and care for each other to voluntarily go into that minefield, to go first. And the vulnerability could look like the person who maybe said the not okay statement to actually confess, like that I said something that I know a lot of you didn't like, and I'm still not sure what was wrong with it. That's scary to admit, rather than, okay, let me just apologize very quickly, even though I actually think technically I didn't do anything wrong.
That's learned behavior from when we were kids. Go and apologize. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, and you do see that. Let's say you see managers or public figures like apologizing, but not necessarily learning from it. Because like, let's just quickly get over this hump, and so that everyone can go back to their regular lives. But if we want to support learning, then we, the offended, or we who have grouses with, let's say, the things that were said, we also need to give space for each other's learning, And I get it that it can feel, oh, this is so tiresome, it's so exhausting, so why should I have to carry that burden? And yeah, you're not obliged to carry the burden of someone else's learning. But if you do want change, then that's the hardest part, that you have to do that kind of work of let's support each other's journey towards wisdom. And wisdom looks like engaging in hard conversations. They are tiring, and they should be entered into with people who are speaking in good faith, Because I do think some people who say, let's say, the not great things, some of them are sincere about wanting to understand what is so wrong with what I just said, and someone needs to have good faith on their end, saying like, I'm going to walk you through that. Not in a way that is like, oh, you're terrible, how can you not understand this? Like, what if that person is sincere but I actually really don't understand it?
Yeah.
Can we hold that space for them? Yeah.
Yeah. And it refers back to what you said earlier about the bringing everything to the table and making this visible. So that's the job of facilitator. So apologizing for something in general actually assumes that we understand what we did wrong, and very often we don't, because otherwise we would have acted differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, it actually must be a conversation with the vulnerable question of, what do you see that I haven't?
Yeah. And it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
and it not be entered into lightly, but if it feels right for you emotionally and psychologically to get into that conversation, then that's a leadership moment on both sides.
Yeah.
You know, like let's get into that minefield. Let's talk this through, because if the thing we're after is not a cheap apology and the thing we're after is behavioral change or cultural change, then the roots of the change is in the world of beliefs. It's all in the mental model stuff, not in the actions of apology. It's in the, oh, I now see. I now get a little bit of that. Then from those roots would spring forth a more sincere version of an apology. So I think it's okay for people not to be quick to apologize if they have not fully discovered what is this thing they're apologizing for. Yeah. But I understand it's complex territory. Yeah. Because sometimes, even if you are sincere about wanting to learn about what you did wrong, the other party may not be ready to be your educator. You know? And that's okay, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there might be hurt and open wounds. And then it's difficult to really hear and listen each other. And also, our defense mechanisms to protect our belief systems and our right doing are so strong.
Yeah.
That's why, it's a leadership capability, this facilitation. And to facilitate these kind of conversations and create the space for teams to step into that space.
Yeah.
What remains your facilitation challenge?
That's my facilitation challenge. I think the eternal challenge is always, what is the room ready for? And I'm talking about external engagements, let's say client engagements. Because sometimes there is the expressed ambition of, for example, we want to have a team conversation that builds psychological safety. Let's just say that. But it's not about the conversation that you open up in, say, 2 hours. It's the aftermath, right? Because real change happens over days and weeks and months of what you do with what was opened up in a conversation. And sometimes the facilitator is not around to support that. You have no guarantee of what happens. Like the marriage therapist were like, I can't be there every single day to police the way you talk to each other. All I can do is give you, this is what we've discovered, this is what we have learned. You have to go out and practice it. Yeah. I think that's the most challenging thing for a facilitator, that you kind of want and hope that people take whatever was opened up in a conversation, that they take it out into the real world. Yeah. The facility is not the real world in many ways. Yeah.
It's like a dojo. It's a little practice space where you can make visible what is possible.
Yeah.
It creates some hope.
Yes.
And how do you facilitate what comes after?
Well, if you're lucky, you are engaged in a longer term change process with the client, right? Those are the most meaningful versions of the job, where you get to see a group of human beings journey through change, right? And hopefully what is programmed into that process is not just a series of conversations, but a series of habit forming practices, right? Yeah.
Growing muscles.
Yeah.
Growing
Yeah.
muscles. Yeah. One final question that I always ask. According to you, what makes a workshop fail?
Oh man, what makes a workshop fail? So many things. I think what makes it fail from a facilitator point of view is when you forget who you are and who you're supposed to be in the room. You know, like sometimes you can be triggered by things that are said or the way people are acting, and you forget that you're meant to be on the borders of inside and outside. You're not meant to, be too involved. Yeah, that you forget yourself. Yeah, but beyond that, say you have done your own self mastery and the process is amazing, everything was perfect. What can cause massive failure in a room is just people choosing not to show up as their better selves. And you can't control that. The whole point of facilitation is not to control like a god what happens in a room. You can't. You're ultimately dealing with these complex human beings and they will show up in whatever way they choose to show up. Yeah. So you can't you can't facilitate away deep dysfunctions. Let's just say. And so it's not a point of failure on your part, but a point of like, oh, wow, that's difficult. Yeah.
And then really starting at the beginning with the small steps to change.
Yeah.
To first make it possible to have a conversation when there are deep dysfunctions, I mean. Or how would you proceed with that? Would you work with the entire group when you sense that there are deep dysfunctions?
I guess the skill of the facilitator is how do I use myself right now to name what I'm seeing in the room, and in a way that serves them and not just serves you, to save your face as the facilitator, but to just present it in a way that isn't blaming or shaming, but just an observation of what may be supporting the conversation and what may not be supporting the conversation, and to present choice, to make it a bit more specific, let's just say you're called to facilitate a org conversation, and let's say half the room is just not listening to you and they're on their computers doing work, right? You can pause the process and just name what you're noticing, right? I notice half of the room is working on the process and half the room is on their computers right now. I have no idea what kind of deadlines you're meeting. I have no idea what kind of work day you've had. I would like to give you that choice to opt out of this conversation if that is permissible by your internal team. Are we allowed to say half the room can go out and tend to the urgent work that they need to tend? It's like you need to show that I am on your side as well.
And creating agency.
I don't know. Yeah. So let's exercise some agency. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's usually often also a sign that the participants are not sure what their role is and why they are really there if they're on their computers. And if they are still on their computers, despite knowing why they're there, then apparently, as you said, there's something that is more urgent. And then who are you to judge?
Yeah. Or give them space to voice that out. Right? Like I just hear from 2 or 3 people in this room right now about why, about help me understand why you must be on your computers throughout this whole thing. Because if it's really legit and reasonable, I do think you should be given that space to do some work. Yeah. Acknowledge that must be a tough place to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. What a rich and juicy conversation.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. Very nerdy facilitation talk.
Yes, that's what I enjoyed the most. Thank you so much for your generous sharing. If someone would like to get in touch or work with you or find more of your wisdom, where would they go?
Well, you can look for us at ourcommonground.com.sg, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. Shiao-yin Kuik is only one of me. And I write a newsletter called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, which is field notes of what I'm learning as I go through this cultural change stuff. Yeah.
Beautiful. And we'll put all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you for staying tuned and for listening until the very end. I hope that you found the inspiration and the wisdom that you are looking for. And I hope that you will subscribe to the show so that you never miss any of the interviews with another inspiring facilitator from across the world. I'm devoted to continue this podcast and to deliver weekly an episode that maintains the quality that you expect and you deserve. And if you would like to help me to maintain this quality and to keep the podcast free, please help us. Visit workshops.work/support to make a small donation to keep the podcast free. Thank you so much. I hope to be in your ears next week.